perinatal justice and accountability. Today, we also want to give a special thank you to DHS for partnering with us to bring this forth with you today as well. We are excited today as we begin to kick off our maternal infant health series in combination with Project ECHO. And this series will include Black maternal health disparities, including topics surrounding racism and ACEs, changing and preparing mothers of color for pregnancy. We have kicked off the series previously with other providers and presenters with presentations addressing racism as a public health crisis with Dr. Kamara Jones. Additionally, we've covered the topic of historical perspectives on Black maternal health disparities with the presentation from Dr. Vaughn Moore and Representative Ruth Richardson. Again, we want to thank you all for joining us today. And what I will do is begin by also introducing Dr. Scott and reading the great things that she has been doing for us. And as we advance the disparities and inequities in the field. So Dr. Karen Scott is a chief Black feminist physician scientist, founding CEO and owner of Birthing Cultural Rigor, LLC, with more than 20 years of experience supporting women, girls, and persons across the sexual and reproductive life force in urban and suburban communities across the Midwest and California. She is an improvement and implementation scientist and activist grounded in a Black feminist reproductive justice practice, with formal training and experience as community-based OBGYN and applied epidemiologist. Dr. Scott's ethical, theoretical, and methodological approaches irrigate health services provision, evaluation, and training, and imposed upon the humanity, bodies, and living of Black women, mothers, and people in the afterlife of slavery and passage of the Congressional Act of 1807. She is also the developer and owner of the first and only validated patient-reported experience measure of obstetric racism, known as the PREM-OB scale, and principal investigator of the Sacred Birth Study. Dr. Scott also developed the virtual perinatal quality improvement prioritization by affected communities, or VQPAC protocol, a Black feminist methodology and facilitated community participation in prioritizing untested sociocultural perinatal QI recommendations across the domains of the PREM-OB scale in order to mitigate obstetric racism during hospital labor, birth, and postpartum. So we are so excited to have her join us today to kick off Wayside's Maternal Infant Health Series, and for all of the insight that she will bring to us today as we really move forward to reducing the disparities and inequities within this area. So with that, what I will do is turn it over to Dr. Scott. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for your patience, everyone. I'm having a moment today, but thank you for joining. I'm gonna, Nicole or someone, can someone enable me to use the screen, enable me to use the share screen, please? Oh, thank you, I see it. Perfect. Okay, thank you very much for your patience. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you all essentially how I have utilized the perspectives and narratives of Black mothers and birthing people across the United States in an effort to transform the role of OBGYNs and those in professional personal relationships with OBGYNs in advancing perinatal justice and accountability. This is my disclosure statement. I am the maternal care quality improvement expert or consultant for Black Mamas Matter Alliance, specifically for the Merck for Mothers, Safer Childbirth Cities. So I want to also share who I am, a little bit more than what was shared in the introduction. I am Southern born and raised from East Nashville before gentrification. I am very grateful for the gift of a liberal arts education from the 5th grade actually until completion of medical school. I am a lifelong learner, and I do believe this is the way. I identify as a proud Black feminist reproductive justice avenger, a Wakanda healer, a Yoda follower, a Care Bear hugger, a public health OBGYN, applied epidemiologist, and a health systems disruptor transformer. I am celebrating 19 years as a community-based trained and serving OBGYN, and I do believe my main purpose, all of my passion and power, is for advancing cultural rigor through the operationalization of Black feminism, reproductive justice, and research justice in participatory quality improvement science practice, research, as well as interprofessional education. At the end of this presentation today, and our time together, I hope that you'll be able to explain the challenges in diagnosing and dismantling obstetric racism through traditional perinatal quality improvement and implementation initiatives. I also hope that you'll be able to examine your own professional and personal biases and assumptions around Blackness, Black bodies, Black births, Black mothers and birthing people, and Black women's intellectual thoughts and political activism in the health sciences and public health. I hope that you'll be able to identify, utilize, describe 3 theoretical frameworks that will help you to reimagine the lived experiences of Black women and people in society and in hospital births. And as well, I hope that you'll be able to describe strategies to amplify patient narratives and community wisdom in perinatal QI science practice and research. I do ask at the end that the first and last question go to a Black, Indigenous person, woman of color, birth worker, or scholar of color. I want to start with our truths from our program. And in the spirit of transparency, this is what we believe. This is how we demonstrate our beliefs and feelings for Black people. We believe, trust, value, and adore Black people, women, and mothers. Black people, women, and mothers are worthy, period. We prioritize, protect, cite, and amplify Black women's people's voices, intellectual thoughts, of experiences, and political activism. We activate and advance the power and potential and not pathology of Black people, women, and mothers, and our chosen and given kin. And I know it is common for most epidemiologists and data folks to start with statistics, and usually they are embedded in a place of death and morbidity, dis-ease, discomfort. I like to start with our vision. I like to start with our power and potential and what we believe Black mothers and birthing people are deserving of, and that is a sacred birth. Sacred birth is a radical attitude towards human births, specifically Blackness, Black bodies, and Black births that regards all birth activities as fundamentally normal, healthy, spiritual, familial, magical, transformative, erotic, communal, emancipatory, and power activating. Sacred birth encourages diverse and inclusive birth pleasure, practices, care, spaces, options, partners, communities, and experiences. The sacred birth movement advocates for safer, respectful, dignified, high-quality participatory birth care, conditions, experiences, and outcomes, as well as an improved workforce diversification, development, sustainability, and restoration of Black midwifery care and Black doula support models as part of its campaign. And this definition was informed a lot by Black women birthing justice, as well as the words and feelings and lived experiences of Black mothers and birthing people and Black women scholars and birth workers. I would like for you to listen to this it's a trailer for a documentary. And the reason why I introduced this now, because although we have a vision, we have our truths, there is a reality of birthing in the United States. And I want you to think about what we've shared in terms of our truths and our vision and what the reality is in the United States.
Well, I mean, at this point, the American dream is pretty much a myth. I have a dream that my poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Black women in America have very little opportunity to speak and be heard. If you are African American, you are likely to have a higher percentage of any ill.
I feel like different races have different options. If you ask a doctor, is it safe to go to a midwife? Their answer will always be no. They're using the scare factor just to make sure at the end of the day, it's all about money.
African American women get treated different, totally different. When they go into these doctor's offices, when they go into the hospital, due to they may go in with the hair flying, meaning that the hair is not all there together, and because of that, these nurses judge them. My American dream is that we all be treated the same. We all be equal, no matter about the skin or the color. It shouldn't matter of what type of insurance you have. Everyone should be treated the same way with the same care.
I feel are easier for our women of color to, I just want to say the word give up. It's something that's instilled in us or instilled in like the, people of color that this is what we have. This is what we're going to get. Instead of reaching for the stars, this is what this is all we got. This is the United States.
In holding a necessary and yet temporary space for the harm because change is already happening, I share the following quote. Being born and giving birth are important moments of our liberation. In a Western society that does not yet respect and honor the full, brilliant self-determination and spiritual power of Black women, the oppressive tendencies of the medical industrial complex violate the sacredness of birth, from Pauline Ann Mackenzie Day and Alexis Pauline Gumbs, mother and daughter doula team, again, an excerpt from Birthing Justice. Yesterday, I listened to this narrative that you see on the screen now, and I was moved to tears as a Black mother performs what Dr. Donahue Davis names as racial reconnaissance, which is one of the dimensions of obstetric racism, as defined by Dr. Davis, and which I will define for you later. But for now, I invite you to listen to the story of a Black mother who is also a Black woman pediatrician who describes the Herculean efforts made by Black women to avoid or mitigate racist encounters, including being hypervigilant about procedures and finding providers. This is racial reconnaissance.
Thank you for this meaningful study. Although I was stressed out due to delivering at the peak of COVID-19 in New York, I strongly believe that my experiences were better than most other Black women delivering at the same time, simply due to my profession as a pediatrician. I was able to call in many of my friends who were Black OBGYNs working in the hospital to oversee my care, and they helped me tremendously. It is very unfortunate that my connections and profession afforded me with these opportunities, despite the fact that overall it was quite traumatic due to the pandemic. I pray that the system changes for the better to accommodate all Black birthing bodies so everyone receives similar special care and attention, regardless of their career paths and internal connections. Thank you.
So based on our vision, our truth, the reality of birthing while Black in the United States, and your role as an OBGYN or someone in a type of personal or professional relationship with an OBGYN, I invite you to participate in a self-reflection. How do Black mothers and birthing people feel in our care? And in our presence, how do Black mothers and birthing people feel free or fear? From the powerful words from doula Gina Mariela Rodriguez, a doula, again, an excerpt from Birthing Justice, we get a sense of birthing as a Black, Indigenous woman, person of color in the United States. I came to understand the hospital as a place that continues the colonization of our bodies, our wombs, our first breaths. Colonization is defined as the action or process of settling among and establishing control over the Indigenous people of an area. Colonization is also defined as the action of appropriating a place or domain for one's own use. Appropriating is the action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission. And in this quote, I am reminded of the brilliance of historian Dr. Deidre Cooper Owens from her book, Medical Bondage, in which she stated, the men who practiced antebellum era medicine needed bodies to advance the field and to recognize formal medicine as legitimate. We're talking about 19th century. The ready availability of sick Black female bodies did more than aid pioneering gynecological surgeons as they cured formerly incurable diseases. In order to decolonize births, I realized as an OBGYN, I need to describe birthing experiences through the perspectives of the communities carrying the greatest burden of deaths and near deaths, as well as the greatest power and potential to offer solutions, particularly since the mothers of gynecology originate within and across generations of Black enslaved women in the role of surgical teachers, healers, nurses, and patients. Let's look briefly at some national data. The pregnancy-related mortality ratio, or PRMR, is defined as the number of deaths during pregnancy, childbirth, or within 42 days after a birth per 100,000 live births. In 2018, the PRMR for the United States was 17.4, placing the United States 55th to other countries in the World Health Organization latest ranking, just behind Russia at 17 and just ahead of the Ukraine at 19 deaths. Currently, the US health system watches and facilitates this death gap at about 41 deaths compared to the lowest ratio, about 12 deaths among Hispanic women. Last, the PRMR among Black women with at least a college degree remains 5 times higher than white women with similar education. Education is not going to save us. And also in the state of Minnesota, the PRMR rate from 2011 to 2017 for non-Hispanic Black women was 2.3 times higher, and among Indigenous women and people, the rate was 4 times higher when compared to white women. I previously shared that on average, 41 deaths occur among Black mothers and birthing people per year. For every one maternal death, 100 women suffer from a severe maternal morbidity or a life-threatening complication or diagnosis that requires life-saving procedures during a hospitalization. This means that 4,100 additional Black mothers and birthing people experience a near miss. And using the SMM rate, or this near death rate, as a key performance indicator for your hospital or your own practice and care as an OBGYN, what does it say about your past, present, and future commitment to Black people-focused, anti-racist perinatal justice, awareness, accountability, and action? 60 to 7% of pregnancy-related deaths are preventable. Thus, racial and reproductive health inequities persist. This means, again, approximately 30 more Black mothers and birthing people could still be here with us and their families. Instead, we continue to blame and burden Black mothers, birthing people, and their families, our communities, with the responsibility of preventing their own death or near death. Based on our vision, our truths, the reality of birthing while Black in our US hospitals, the data, and your role as an OBGYN or someone in a proximal relationship with an OBGYN, I invite you to participate in another reflection. What are the ethical and moral responsibilities and implications of the knowledge and beliefs you value, you utilize, you document, and disseminate in the provision of care? How do your words and behavior as an OBGYN or someone in proximity to an OBGYN honor and protect Black women, girls, and people seeking help or health care in your hospital? Despite the establishment of state and national perinatal quality collaborations and advances in reproductive technologies and social protections such as higher education, which we saw does not protect us, hospitals do not keep Black women safe. The primary drivers include a lack of clear ethical boundaries, perpetuation of whiteness or white adjacent leadership, and a hierarchy of knowledge construction that is deeply grounded in anti-Black racist, sexist, classist, and misogynistic ideologies and practices. The secondary drivers on that bottom row manifest as poor science that continuously fails to illuminate the oppression, resistance, and resilience of Black women's and people's lived experiences due to a lack of historical context and cultural and scientific rigor. Failure to interrogate, disrupt, and reimagine quality improvement ethics, leadership, knowledge, and science leads to missed opportunities to name misogynoir, as coined by Dr. Moya Bailey, and not race or gender alone as the driver for the presence, permeation, and exacerbation of maternal and perinatal inequities. We must speak with truth and transparency about the problem through a structural analysis of power, privilege, positionality, policies, people, and potential. Without truth, transparency, and trust, then we fail to transform health services provision, training, and evaluation through dignified and equitable community participation and partnerships. And without community participation and partnerships, we continue to weaponize race against Black women's interests, humanity, and liberation during hospitalization for birth. So again, I invite you to learn more about the role of the philanthropic industrial complex in maintaining and at times exacerbating the perinatal death or near-death gap. My co-authors and I examine the belief held by many philanthropists that the most structurally marginalized and minoritized communities lack an existing repository of historical and contemporary knowledge to address social and health inequities. In so doing, we outline how philanthropy, especially in perinatal and reproductive health services research, quality improvement, and implementation science, has contributed to the diminishing political power, legitimacy, and effectiveness of community voices and leadership in research injustice, cultural arrogance, philanthropic redlining, and community harm. Philanthropic redlining is a discriminatory practice of inequitable distribution of philanthropic funds combined with neglect of justice-centered, Black-led institutions, and is fueled by discriminatory notions that Black-led institutions are ineffective, inferior, and fraudulent. The consequence of historical and contemporary philanthropic redlining is that as little as 8% of foundation funding goes to people of color and 1% to the Black community, again reinforcing the belief and practice that social change within the Black community must be led by white-governed institutions. Philanthropic redlining leads to cultural arrogance and community harm, is what you see here on the slide, which further delays radical curiosity, care, and change in perinatal quality improvement and health services provision due to 3 areas of a lack. Lack of shared acknowledgement, perspectives, understanding, language, and meaning. Lack of equitable and sustainable collaboration and coordination across and within organizations and health and public health systems. And last, lack of infrastructure, processes, and practices for collective assessment, alignment, and advancement. Contemporary philanthropic redlining results in funding Black-led teams under white expediency and white urgency. White urgency is the quality of being important that requires swift action that advances white people and those proximal to whiteness, while simultaneously disadvantaging and harming Black people and those amplifying Blackness. White expediency is the quality of being convenient and practical, despite possibly being improper or immoral, resulting in differential risk, barriers, burdens, benefits, and facilitators among those who are Black people or those amplifying Blackness. And our work challenges philanthropic redlining, white urgency, and white expediency in knowledge construction and dissemination. Despite evidence that shows individual level factors alone do not account for racial inequities in the death or near death rates, the construction dissemination of knowledge continues to reproduce and reinforce troubling and disturbing narratives that Black bodies are subhuman. that Black lives are unworthy, and Black mothers of birthing people are to blame for disproportionate adverse birth outcomes. These misconceptions are disseminated regularly throughout many disciplines, including QI and implementation, in the form of problematic stories, scripts, and stereotypes. These social and clinical norms then invade and infect interactions, communications, counseling, decision-making, and dissemination and documentation of healthcare information about patients in our communities and patient handoffs and the electronic health records. In my recent 2021 manuscript, in feminist anthropology, I explain how the spread of racism and perinatal QI is magnified by the lack of accountability for controlling, constraining, and censoring Black women's voices and intellectual thoughts. Excuse me. The problem with perinatal QI innovation and transformation. Give me a couple of seconds. The problem with perinatal QI innovation and transformation is the hypervisibility of Black women as victims and the structural exclusion and erasure of Black women as patient, community, and content experts. Most perinatal QI leaders and data scientists lack nuanced knowledge and insight into the various ways that power differentials and dynamics continue to contribute to variation in quality and safety. Give me like 20 seconds. I'm getting a cough drop. I'll be right back. I will repeat the last sentence. So most perinatal QI leaders and data scientists lack nuanced knowledge and insight into the various ways that power differentials and dynamics contribute to variation in quality and safety. Without any legal or ethical oversight, the fathers of perinatal QI birthed the practice of epistemic redlining, which is the hidden ranking system that assigns value and visibility to the humanity, scholarship, voices, and lived experiences of white people or people adjacent to and protective of whiteness. Epistemic redlining in perinatal QI creates two forms of injustice that you see here on the screen that underline Black women's capacity as knowledge generators. Epistemic injustice discounts the credibility of Black women's voices and narratives of their own lived experiences, resulting in testimonial injustice, while hermeneutical injustice renders Black women as incapable of making sense of their own experiences and of having them understood by others. A deeper analysis of perinatal QI reveals an abusive over-reliance on quantitative data from diseased or dead Black female bodies for the legitimization of separate but equal ethics and practices in perinatal QI. Thus, we argue that perinatal QI epistemology reproduces racialized and gendered or misogynistic misconceptions about Blackness, Black womanhood, and Black birthing people that undermine our humanity and justice. Beginning with conversations with Black women in community, humanity, social sciences, and philanthropy in the design phase, Sacred Birth applies the Black feminist anthropological theories and methodologies to activate an unapologetic and fierce authority to declare two truths of resistance. Number one, the lives of Black women and people with the capacity for reproduction and pregnancy-related experiences are worthy. And number two, Black women and people deserve high-quality care experiences that honor the full expression of our humanity, power, and potential. We can no longer deny the historical and contemporary existence of reproductive and perinatal apartheid here in the United States health systems. In 2018, I described the meaning, manifestation, and mechanisms of action of this particular type of apartheid. Reproductive and perinatal apartheid describes a system of racial and ethnic separation rooted in a hierarchy of value, power, potential, knowledge, and participation based on skin color, resulting in the pursuit, provision, and proliferation of safe, respectful, dignified, responsive, high-quality reproductive and perinatal care and experiences during pregnancy, labor, childbirth, and postpartum for a dominant group. This specific type of reproductive and perinatal apartheid is manifested in many ways, such as differential ideologies, policies, and practices within and across different systems, such as healthcare, housing, education, the judicial system, law enforcement, labor workforce, and family, as well as differential quality, provision, and proliferation of care, opportunities, and options, all the way leading to differential literacy, health literacy, sexual, reproductive, and perinatal literacy, and differential maternal and infant or perinatal mortality and morbidity rates. This list is not exhaustive, but reproductive and perinatal apartheid are operationalized through mechanisms of actions that privilege one universal identity, sexuality, reproduction, birth, and motherhood, parenthood, while denying, constraining, and undermining the self-determination, expression, and development of a less dominant group. In the absence of reproductive safety, agency, and dignity among structurally excluded, marginalized, and minoritized groups. I stepped outside of medicine and QI and looked to social sciences and public health to reflect what our Black feminist anthropologists and other humanities scholars have always known and written about. I needed a model of scholarship and humanism, activism, and infinite love for Black people, women, and mothers that recognize intersectional oppression, harms, and control, while at the same time illuminating our resolve to push through and rise up through acts of community resistance and resilience. Dr. Leith Mullen's Sojourner Syndrome reveals why perinatal QI should publicly acknowledge and reconcile decades of disseminating half-truths through the omission of Black women's resistance and resilience through radical love, care, and scholarship of Black women, doulas, lactation educators, midwives, obstetricians, activists, and experts in the humanities, social sciences, public health, and legal studies. In the Sacred Birth Study, we prioritize participant observation, individual case studies, focus groups, ethnographic questionnaires, and a strategy of community participation as exemplified through Dr. Mullen's Harlem Birth Project. Our third explanatory framework is Dr. Donna Ian Davis's obstetric racism. Spring 2018, I started working on addressing birth equity and perinatal QI in California. And by the end of 2018, I realized I did not have, and not just we, QI, did not have an explanatory framework to explain the phenomenon of pregnancy, labor, birth, and postpartum as a Black mother birthing person across time and space in hospitals and health systems. And at the same time, I came across Dr. Donna Ian Davis's online publication of The Racial Politics of Pregnancy, Labor, and Birthing. Then later in June 19, her brilliant book, Reproductive Injustice, was published and released. Obstetric racism sits at the intersection of obstetric violence and medical racism. It describes the mechanisms and practices of subordination to which Black women and people's reproduction, including our preconception, pregnancy, prenatal, labor, birth, and postpartum care, are subjected to that track along histories of anti-Black racism. Obstetric racism is a threat to positive birth outcomes. Obstetric racism gives the field of QI a novel and nuanced, explanatory, multifactorial, multidimensional framework for describing the mechanisms of action, including the people, perspectives, policies, power, places, processes, pathways, and procedures that interact directly or indirectly to produce stressors such as diagnostic lapses, neglect, dismissiveness, intentional pain, or ceremonies of degradation. And these are all dimensions of obstetric racism from multiple sources that contribute to a single adverse outcome, such as a near death, or a death from unnecessary low-risk primary cesarean birth, a postpartum hemorrhage, or a severe hypertensive crisis. Alternatively, obstetric racism also explains how one single stressor, such as performing a cervical exam on a patient with the intent of initiating a labor by stripping the membranes, can then be translated as doing so without informed consent, leading to 27 hours of labor, a cesarean birth for arrest of active phase, again, imposing labor without really getting consent or explaining the reasons for or the consequences. That then leads to post-operative infection and possibly a neonatal intensive care unit admission for the newborn. With obstetric racism, we finally have a conceptual framework that situates modern day clinical and research protocols, here are all the P's again, practices, procedures, programs, policies, specifically the language, narratives, and archetypes of Black women in the afterlife of slavery. And I quote from Dr. Davis's book, "Conceptually, the afterlife is not simply a consequential expression of inheritable trauma. In other words," she says, "I am not arguing that the afterlife of slavery has resulted in an epigenetic phenomenon, although it may. Instead, I argue that one way Black women's prenatal experience, pregnancy, and birthing can be understood is an extension and beliefs that can be traced back to antebellum and postbellum periods. What we see is that racism is continuously recalibrated, a racism that is a reinterpretation of enduring processes of slavery. And I say that that recalibration continues because there are differences in power, differentials and dynamics and expressions in birth, particularly in hospital settings. Obstetric violence is a term typically used by anthropology, law, public health, and other related fields that characterize situations when health systems and hospitals control people with capacity for pregnancy as patients are seeking help or health care in the field of obstetrics. And it subjects people as patients to dehumanizing treatment because healthcare professionals and staff exert reproductive dominance or power over their clients. Highlighting the extent to which women and people are explicitly abused by medical staff or any personnel reveals the degree to which healthcare infrastructure is built on institutional relations of power and violence, especially during pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. Medical racism is a phenomenon that occurs when the race of a patient influences the treatment of diagnostic decisions in the broader context of medical health services provision and involves the racialization of every aspect of every organ of every Black body. So here I have things described to your left about obstetric racism, and on your right, you will see a figure that describes a model of patient-centered access to care. So according to Dr. Davis's framework, obstetric racism transcends the limits of obstetric violence and medical racism and achieves the 4 goals. Number 1, obstetric racism situates the specific ways that the reproducing Black body is subjected to medical interventions based on racial hierarchies that have led to differential practices, policies, programs, potential, promises, possibilities, and power, equivalent to what I've also described as reproductive and perinatal apartheid. Number 2, obstetric racism delineates particular forms of exploitation that are historically created during slavery and that structure Black value as it is defined during the social and clinical interactions of Black women with clinicians and staff within biomedical and healthcare infrastructures. The 3rd goal, obstetric racism reinforces anti-Blackness as the rationale for harmful healthcare experiences, whereby scholars and activists move beyond race or racism as a sorting mechanism that determines access to ways in which people are able to get pregnant, maintain pregnancy, maintain their life and livelihood throughout pregnancy and birth as the mother birthing person and as the child. And this happens, as we see, with assisted reproductive technology, as well as other forms of reproductive and perinatal care. Obstetric racism also structures the experiences of Black women and how they can access care. So in this image to your right, this is Levesque et al.'s 2013 conceptual framework of patient-centered access to care, which I'm going to say is sacred birth for the purposes of this presentation, where access to sacred birth is defined as the opportunity of a patient or population to identify their birth needs, to seek birth services, to reach, to obtain, or use birth services, and to actually have their need for birth services fulfilled. This pathway from healthcare perception to fulfillment is located at the interface or interactions between, at the top, you'll see the 5 dimensions of accessibility, which are the responsibility of the system. And that includes all the A's: approachability, acceptability, availability and accommodation, and affordability and appropriateness. And again, we would need the system's accessibility to then be able to interface or interact with the 5 corresponding population abilities. And these abilities include the ability to perceive, seek, reach, pay, and engage the healthcare system. So obstetric racism is a way in which we can define and now measure and monitor and hopefully modify Black mothers and birthing people's pathway to accessing a sacred birth through this framework and the measure that I developed. One may think comparing the US hospital experiences, birthing experiences to slavery is extreme. One participant from a 2019 focus group who had no prior knowledge of Davis's scholarship shared, "You push out the baby and then you go back on the fields and you keep picking the cotton." Decolonizing perinatal QI requires a dismantling of the hierarchy of power and dominance as structured by the medicalization and professionalization of birth and QI. A paradigm shift liberates and then redistributes the epicenter of power and knowledge towards Black mothers, birthing people, and community leaders. Here, I share another reflection from a Black mother after vaginal birth of a healthy term, normal weight infant that latches well and does not require admission into the NICU. Based on traditional QI standards, success would be achieved. As the Black mother sat holding her baby during the repair of a perineal or birth laceration in the vulva or external area in the female genitalia, she thought to herself, "Though he put me back together, I still don't feel whole." This quote highlights the limitation in current QI knowledge, science, and data that prioritizes outcome measures over patient experience measures. Examining quality of care through clinical outcomes exclusively establishes 2 lies as truths. Number 1, Blackness is biologically inferior. Particularly, Black women are broken, deficient, and more vulnerable or susceptible to disparate birth outcomes. And the second lie, the absence of clinical pathology signifies the presence of perinatal equity. And I will repeat that one. This is a lie. The absence of clinical pathology signifies the presence of perinatal equity. However, a validated patient-reported experience measure of the problem designed for, by, and with Black mothers and birthing people to supplement outcome process and structural measures would highlight the many different forms of violence and abuse that medical personnel and potentially any personnel within medical institutions and health systems perpetuate against Black women. Here we share a quote from the 2019 focus group and how that quote informed the development of the theorized patient quality care domains within our scale. And so to have people of your culture or you share some similar background, it just makes you feel safe, comfortable, received, accepted, no judgment. A Black mother in Oakland. Based on the words, feelings, perspectives, and lived experiences of the community as patient experts in survey development and validation, we defined racial and cultural concordance as exemplars of safety and as a way to form social kinship with hospital clinicians and staff in order to achieve and sustain safety and systems accountability. Here's another quote from 2019 focus groups. "I feel like they don't prepare you or tell you what happens if you tear or if you hemorrhage. You know, like that information is not readily available. They just take action. So when it happens, it's very scary and traumatic. But I feel like if doctors and OBs and PAs, and like if they were all just a little bit more considerate, Black Mother Los Angeles, PA physician assistant. Black mothers and birthing people defined a lack of transparency and relevant clinical education and a lack of systems trust and confidence in a patient's capacity to understand social and clinical phenomenon of birth and to make competent decisions as a violation of communication, autonomy, and empathy and humanity. As inspired by Black feminist anthropologist Dr. Mullins and Dr. Davis, we applied a Black feminist praxis to examine power relations, differentials, and dynamics within the medical industrial complex. Prior to the Sacred Birth study, no validated participatory patient-reported experience measure of obstetric racism, AKA the PREM-OB scale, exists that characterizes the impact of the quality of hospital-based intrapartum care on the patient experience as defined for, by, and with Black mothers and birthing people in existing dignified and equitable partnerships with Black women-led community-based organizations and Black women scholars. On the screen, you'll see the 3 aims that are listed. We successfully completed aim 2, November 30th, 2020. We completed aim 1, April 30th, 2021. And we're currently right now doing data analysis for aim 3. A little bit about our design. Sacred Birth started a participatory quality improvement movement that was informed by the late Dr. Leith Mullins' exploration of our oppression, resistance, and resilience, and the racism and obstetric violence as defined by Dr. Davis's obstetric racism. We operationalized Black feminist praxis, reproductive justice, and research justice through the 4 modalities of cultural rigor, which I'll show you in a future slide. Traditional survey development processes were adapted by Black women-led, transdisciplinary, and transgenerational team of Black women scholars, a health services researcher who is not a Black person, and about 1,000 Black mothers and birthing people over the last 2 years. Measured development steps included adopting our explanatory frameworks, co-facilitating focus groups by researchers and community with Black birthing people in Oakland and LA, a scoping review of existing patient experience measures using a novel cultural rigor screening protocol, mapping of existing items onto domains identified from focus groups, and creation of de novo or new items because the existing literature did not align with the everyday lived experience of Black women and birthing people as it relates to developing a PREM. A modified Delphi survey of primarily Black women subject matter experts who helped to prioritize the items. We conducted cognitive interviewing with Black mothers and birthing people to better refine the items. And then we had a final review and compilation for pilot testing that we completed last year by our researchers and community members. We applied a Black feminist praxis to examine power relations, differentials, and dynamics within the medical industrial complex and utilized a mixed methods, multi-cohort, participatory approach that centered the narratives and lived experiences of 880 Black women and people as patient, content, and community experts. In our work, we are all experts, and we all have valid experiences to bring to the work of quality improvement and implementation science. Our participatory QI model requires completion of easy 1, 2, 3 steps. Name the problem, define the problem through Black feminist intellectual thought and political activism, and design and implement methods to measure, monitor, and modify the problem and mobilize awareness, action, and accountability towards truth, liberation, equity, and justice based on patient narratives and community wisdom. Sacred Birth started a participatory QI movement where our ethical, theoretical, and methodological approaches are again informed by the scholarship of Dr. Mullins and Dr. Davis. We utilize a mixed methods, multi-cohort, participatory action approach that shifted the power, including funding, decision-making, and knowledge from those on the left, traditional QI experts and such, to those on the right, to Black mothers and birthing people and Black women-led Black women community leaders who were in existing equitable and dignified partnerships with myself as a principal investigator and the other Black women scholars, artists, and activists on our team across disciplines, geographies, and generations. In 2020, I described and applied the 4 modalities of cultural rigor to philanthropy. Now I apply cultural rigor to QI and implementation science to advance perinatal justice and accountability. So at the top in orange, as an analytic framework, cultural rigor requires the utilization of reproductive and perinatal apartheid, sojourner syndrome, and obstetric racism as the frames by which we examine, explain, and then transform the phenomenon of birthing while Black in US hospitals. Cultural rigor gives us permission and really freedom and the tools to reimagine birth as a righteous act of rage sometimes, resistance, resilience, liberation, love, and so many more things that existing QI measures and methodologies do not acknowledge or integrate into their work. And as a praxis, cultural rigor mandates the operationalization of Black feminism, reproductive justice, and research justice through the implementation of the now validated PREM-OB scale suite of 3 independent measures and the virtual QI prioritization by affected communities or VQPAC. And finally, at the bottom in blue, as a vision for reproductive and perinatal justice, which includes racial and gender justice, cultural rigor creates optimal options, conditions, and opportunities for activating and engaging the power and potential of individuals, communities, and systems where radical imagination and care both thrive. Our vision for perinatal justice and accountability, particularly with the leadership or the new leadership of OBGYNs to us, is replication and expansion of the Sacred Birth Quality Improvement and Implementation Program. In this slide, I share an illustration of how the arc of cultural rigor transports us from the problem on the left, as defined by Black women feminist scholars, to the solution on your right, the solution of a sacred Black birthing patient experience through the operationalization of our 3 frameworks, which are in the center in green, orange, and blue, by affirming and amplifying the lived experiences of Black women and people, again, as patient, community, and content experts in perinatal QI and implementation science. I invite you to check out our latest publications, again, describing the translation of Dr. Davis's explanatory framework of obstetric racism into novel and nuanced QI tools, training, and techniques, including the PREM-OB scale suite. Here is a picture of our team, and I just want to say visually, usually I'm the person on your lower right, where I'm the only. And with the opportunity of having to persuade funders to trust me as the PI, I was able to form a team that better reflected the communities who are carrying the greatest burden of death and near death, but also because I believe we hold the highest power and potential for creating solutions and implementing and sustaining them. So cultural rigor requires a Black women-led research team of Black women scholars in partnership with our academic co-conspirators, representing diverse geographic, demographic, and disciplinary experiences and areas of expertise where public health was the common link, not medicine, not nursing, not QI or data analytics. Public health exclusively was our common thread amongst all of us. And thank you to all of our funders and community partners at the bottom of the screen here. Cultural rigor also required that I engage a Black women-led communications, marketing, and design team. The Sacred Birth Study, the first of its kind, is a quality improvement research study that generated new knowledge to disrupt and transform hospital-based service provision and evaluation through the translation of Black feminist anthropological theory of obstetric racism into novel improvement and implementation science, practice, and research. The design, the validation, and now application, the first and only PREM-OB scale. I'm going to quickly go through some of the data, and then we'll end with a couple of narratives and open it up to questions. And I do have to say, please do not duplicate replicator showing this stuff. It is copyright protected, it's also trademarked, and we are submitting our publication soon in the next couple of weeks, describing the psychometric validation of the patient reported experience measure of obstetric racism scale suite. So this slide essentially shows that over 7 months, 17 hospitals, 2 health centers, 2 health plans, and 1 national community partner submitted letters of support to become a referral partner and to participate in complementary technical assistance calls to review their de-identified hospital-specific data to get a better understanding of how obstetric racism is permeating the provision of care within their health system. On this map, you'll see an image of the United States. It is showing a geographic distribution of respondents in our study by states. On your left, you'll see the scale. The largest circle represents about 31 to 50 respondents. Based on the map, the states with the largest representation outside the study home, which was the state of California, included Mississippi and Tennessee. Yay for the South. Tennessee is my birth state. The South represented 50% of the top 10 states with the highest representation in the study, which makes sense given the location. The highest proportion of Black people in the United States is the South. We highlight relationship and cohabitation status because we want to represent the diversity and inclusion of different ways that people partner in our community. About 1 in 3 Black mothers and birthing people identified as married and living with their partner, while 1 in 4 identified as single. And of those who identified as single, about 15% lived with their partner. We wanted to lift up the voices, narratives, and lived experiences of Black birthing people who may not all identify as women or as heterosexual. Part of our Sacred Birth vision, again, is to honor the diversity of how we seek pleasure, form partnerships, and build chosen or given family. We also want to show a representation of the infants, children, youth, young adults, and adults living in the households of Black mothers or birthing people, especially when we share with you all the household income based on people in the home and the education level of our study participants. The 2 largest groups of households were children aged 0 to 5 years and adults aged 26 to 44 years of age. Our study population consisted of Black mothers and birthing people with many different employment experiences. About 1 in 2 worked 40 hours or more per week, while 1 in 5 identified as unemployed and looking for work. To contextualize these data within our study population of about 815 Black mothers and birthing people, we can now share with you findings around household income, and this is important to illuminate. So 1 in 3, again, were married, living with a partner. 1 in 6 were single, living with a partner, and 1 in 4 were single, living alone. 1 in 4 earned a bachelor's degree, and 1 in 6 earned a master's degree or higher. Again, we already showed you that 1 in 2 were working 40 hours or more per week, while 1 in 5 were unemployed and looking for work. And that the 2 largest groups of people within a household were children 0 to 5, as well as adults 26 to 44 years of age. With all of that, 1 in 3 households in our study had incomes less than $25,000, 1 in 3. And about 60% had household incomes less than $50,000. Our data aligns with the findings from the late Dr. Leith Mullins' research in the Harlem Birthright Project, where we see an inequitable economic return on investment for Black women's education and occupation. We must always seek to contextualize the lived experiences of Black mothers and birthing people seeking help or health care. And as I tell my students, behind every statistic is a story. So what is the story, of your population that you serve day in and day out? In this slide, our data demonstrated that about half of participants qualified for parental medical leave, while the remaining did not qualify, with a small percentage reporting that they were unsure if they qualified for leave. And among the 361 who did qualify, a little more than half of our participants reported 7 weeks to 3 months of leave. We do acknowledge not knowing if the leave was paid as a limitation in our analysis. Here we see the hospitals performed a cesarean birth on a little more than 1 in 3 Black mothers and birthing people, with 53 participants reporting a prior cesarean birth and 19 participants experiencing a vaginal birth after cesarean or a VBAC, with an estimated about 36% VBAC success rate in this particular sample. We do acknowledge that we do not know the number of prior cesarean births in terms of whether they were primary or repeat cesarean births. In our study, we obtained self-reported information about various medical conditions. Among the 777 participants who reported one or more medical conditions, about 1 in 3 were affected by some form of a pre-pregnancy or pregnancy-related hypertensive disorder. We are very grateful that of the 815 participants, 485, or about 60%, provided consent to share their medical records, so we can also be able to look at self-reported conditions and those documented by providers in the health record. I do really like the slide as well, because again, I do believe we need to contextualize help and healthcare seeking trends within the lived experiences, needs, and priorities of Black mothers and birthing people. And it also tells us how Black mothers and birthing people identified the sources to fulfill their needs and whether they had those needs fulfilled in community, represented by the red bar, in the hospital, represented by the orange bar, or both. So in this graph, you see columns in red for community, columns in orange for the hospital. Underneath each column, we list the need. In spite of the educational attainment and employment status of our study populations, our participants reported seeking support for infant feeding care, home visiting programs, violence reduction in and outside the home, including the workplace, mental health support, and spiritual religious support. The bar graph shows that the top 4 priorities of our participants during the 2020 pandemic, based on the list we provided to them, was number 1, seeking food at 43%. And across all 4 areas of need, approximately 4 out of every 5 mothers who birth at hospitals obtain their top 4 needs from community-based resources, demonstrating the solutions fulfilling the needs of Black mothers and birthing people reside within the community. Here is a graph of how we demonstrate the limited value in traditional satisfaction surveys. So for the next 3 slides, you will see I'm going to explain what you're looking at. So you'll see on the vertical axis, columns with varying heights and colors. The higher the column represents the higher number of responses, and the color is associated with this survey item with the key at the top of the slide. So we have 3 questions, 3 colors, red, orange, and yellow for questions 1, 2, and 3. And these also represent, again, across their different phases of care, red being labor, orange being birth, yellow being postpartum. The 5-point Likert response type is also listed on the horizontal axis. We primarily used agreement or frequency scales in our survey. So for this, looking at the alignment between patient expectation and experience across the 3 phases of care, overall 66%, or every 2 out of 3 Black mothers and birthing people, express satisfaction with their care, meaning that their expectation aligned with their experience across the 3 phases of care. Now, a satisfaction type question would lead us to believe then that obstetric racism is not happening, or if it is, Black mothers and birthing people, 66% of my study, are satisfied with it. And this is an example of how data in, data out, or trash in, trash out. A satisfaction survey is not going to get at the root of the problem. In this slide, we then focus on 2 of the theorized domains, racism and communication information exchange. Racism in blue, communication in teal. The horizontal axis again shows the 5-point Likert response using the frequency scale. Now we're going to talk about directionality. Moving from left to right with the red arrows, the response types go from almost never to always, with the directionality of the responses highlighted in red. To your left, responses mean less racism. To your right, responses mean more racism enacted upon Black mothers and birthing people by the hospital staff. And again, the column heights are higher on the right. As you can see, the column heights are higher on the right for both domains. Question 1, racism. 67% of Black mothers and birthing people wished they had more information and support about lactation, breast, chest, body feeding that was specific to Black mothers and birthing people. Question number 2, for communication. 60% of Black mothers and birthing people wish the hospital provided more information about possible complications during labor, birth, and postpartum. And again, when the measure is defined by the feelings, perspectives, and words of Black mothers and birthing people, it is valid. This is not what a hospital thinks is racist. This is not what a hospital thinks is a violation of communication. This is centered on the experiences of Black mothers and birthing people who defined the patient quality care domains in our scale. In this slide, we show two, again, theorized domains: autonomy in peach and dignity in Blackness in orange, with a focus on truth-telling and transparency around the data. Again, these are all definitions, measures, and meanings defined for, by, and with Black mothers and birthing people. Again, the horizontal axis at the bottom shows the same 5-point Likert responses using the frequency scale. This time we have a different directionality, so pay attention to that. Responses on the left demonstrate hospital language and behavior that reproduce more obstetric racism, while responses on your right demonstrate less obstetric racism. So again, we see that the higher columns are this time on the left side of the scale. So question 1, autonomy. The hospital almost never or rarely made sure Black mothers understood the information shared with them by asking them to repeat back or write down what they heard, despite the fact that the majority of respondents reported they understood, but no one assessed their comprehension. Per the 1974 Belmont Report, informed consent, for research at least, consists of information comprehension and voluntariness. We lack accountability for ensuring informed consent and refusal in healthcare services provision. All three must be adequately satisfied when obtaining informed consent or honoring informed refusal. And based on our data, hospital clinicians or staff violated informed consent, specifically comprehension, among 59% of Black mothers and birthing people within 348 hospitals across 34 states and DC during the 2020 pandemic. Question number 2, dignity. The hospital almost never or rarely shared their data on birth outcomes and reassured Black mothers and birthing people about hospital-wide efforts to address racism. Our data showed hospital clinicians or staff failed to provide dignified care by acknowledging how hospitals undermine the dignity of Black mothers and birthing people by denying the truth about the epidemic of death or near death to approximately 81% of Black mothers and birthing people. 81% of Black mothers and birthing people did not have a conversation about the hospital data, given all that we've seen in the media explode. Again, thankful to Black Mothers, Black Mamas Matter Alliance and other activist organizations, but especially in 2020 with the media, hospitals are still not being transparent about their own behavior and impact on Black mothers and birthing people. Here I share 2 graphics to demonstrate the translation of Dr. Davis's 7 dimensions of obstetric racism to your left into 6 patient identified quality care domains on your right in the validated PREM-OB scale. The validated PREM-OB scale suite, which is a suite of 3 independent measures, provides novel data as evidence of obstetric racism through survey development, and also serves as an interpretive tool to excavate the presence and permeation of obstetric racism in any written source describing the patient hospital birthing experience, where the text serves as the unit of analysis, and we're going to demonstrate that now. This QI practice is called the Scott Davis Narrative Data Analytic Method. What you'll see in the remaining slides that I have, and then we'll end, is that you'll see that the text will be color-coded, linking the domain to the text that demonstrates how the domain is either violated or protected. And we believe this method can be applied to any written text, from a patient handoff, an electronic health record, a peer review, a chart review, maternal mortality morbidity reviews, and legal proceedings such as a deposition. So now I'm going to invite you to listen to a Black birthing narrative describing her time in the operating room from 2020. I hope it's on here. Give me a second. Oh, here we go.
While I was being prepped for a C-section, a white woman couldn't get the suction equipment to work, but didn't seem to have much urgency about it, despite the surgeon repeatedly saying she needed suction. I looked over at the white woman, and Black woman quickly took the equipment from her and had it working instantly. I'm so grateful she was in that room. It could have meant life or death for me and my son.
So again, I will show you the written text. I will also play the audio text. And now let's go into this narrative data analytic method. So again, now your text is color coded to your left. The domains of the scale are to your right. And I'm going to explain to you how obstetric racism, the domains are either violated or protected, and follow the text and the arrows as they connect the text to the domain. And again, the feelings and words chosen by Black mothers and birthing people from our focus groups define the meanings and measures of different acts of obstetric racism over our 7 theorized domains in the PREM-OB scale. The first sentence in red demonstrates violations of 3 domains. First, safety is violated due to a lack of protection and security from unintended, unwanted, unplanned, unwelcomed harm, injury, or malicious event, experience, or outcome, such as a faulty equipment or a malfunctioning suction. Accountability is violated when the white nurse or staff person does not demonstrate an appropriate level of responsiveness to the situation, which is witnessed by the patient, a Black pregnant mother on the OR table. Now, herein lies the difference between how internalized racism comes into play. Actually, several levels of racism. And this is why it's important, especially when people ask me, well, white mothers and birthing people also experience harm. Well, this is the difference in the impact. A white mother would never feel or believe that a nurse's lack of urgency would be a result of her race as a white woman. She may think one of 2 things: the hospital facility, specifically the infrastructure or the equipment, is suboptimal or outdated, or the nurse is incompetent or not yet proficient in the OR setting. And that white mother may consider asking for a more experienced nurse or seeking a new hospital for future births. In contrast, a Black mother may initially feel that the nurse's behavior in the OR is a result of the nurse's response to her Blackness. To Black mothers and birthing people, safety and accountability means protection from harmful experiences or outcomes. There was not a bad outcome based on traditional QI data collection, but there was a harmful experience that would be missed if we relied exclusively on outcomes only measure. And this experience is representative of acts against the patient from the hospital clinicians and staff, whereby the hurt may not have been intentional. However, the impact is more important. And impact as defined by the Black mother birthing person is, again, far more important than intent, especially when examining the context of this situation through an analysis of power. Black mothers and birthing people measure safety and accountability through the actions of being attentive, available, and responsive. So here in blue, safety and accountability are activated, not violated. They are activated as a Black mother sees a different nurse, specifically a Black nurse, pay attention and act responsibly to the surgeon's repeated request for suction. In this example, the Black mother feels seen, affirmed, and cared for. In orange, patient dignity is activated and amplified as the Black mother views the actions of the Black nurse as a demonstration of her value as a human being to the Black nurse. The action demonstrated that the hospital valued the life of a Black mother and newborn son. In green, we see the activation and amplification of 3 domains. First, you'll see the actions of the Black nurse again affirm the patient's safety and security, as well as accountability, as the Black mother did not need to remain in a state of fear, fight, or flight, which is what they've described as happening to them as they enter hospitals for birth. The second you'll see is that the impact of the actions of the nurse, of the Black nurse in that moment, and to the patient, activated the patient's dignity as the patient felt her needs, specifically her life, were valued and prioritized by the Black nurse intervening. And number 3, patient empathy and humanity are defined by hospital clinicians and staff imagining themselves in the situation and acting in this manner that upholds the patient humanity. So we'll do one more. Again, the text is on the screen for you to read, but also the audio is here for you to listen.
The biggest issue I had with my labor and delivery experience is the fact that I developed a birthing plan in writing prior to delivery that was in my chart regarding pain control, yet it was not honored. I expressed my need and want for an epidural to anyone who would listen. They cared for me during my time at the hospital, yet any pain medication. This was not because I had a quick labor either. The biggest issue I had with my labor and delivery experience is the fact that I developed a birthing plan in writing prior to delivery that was in my chart regarding pain control, yet it was not honored. I expressed my need and want for an epidural to anyone who would listen. They cared for me during my time at the hospital, yet somehow I was forced to deliver naturally without any pain medication. This was not because I had a quick labor either. I got to the hospital at 7 p.m. They started my induction at about 10 p.m. and I did not deliver until 6:06 a.m. So they had ample amount of time to fulfill my need for an epidural. There was a point where my husband was asleep and I could not yell loud enough to wake him due to the amount of pain I was in, but I could reach the nurse's button, but nobody would respond. I felt like I was in pure hell, and it was the worst, most painful, most traumatic experience I had to endure when it comes to labor and delivery, and this is my 4th child.
So again, you've heard and or read the narrative. Here we see the narrative organized in color and follow the arrows with the color. So the first sentence in red demonstrates a violation of 3 domains. Safety is violated due to a lack, again, of protection and security from unintended, unwanted, unplanned, unwelcome harm, injury, or malicious event, experience, or outcome, and in this case, inadequate pain control as stated by the patient in her birth plan. In red, we see that communication and information domain is violated. A birth plan is a primary method for patients to experience and or ensure feeling heard, seen, and listened to, believed in, and comforted. In red, you'll see patient autonomy is violated based on having desires, expectations, and needs that are not acknowledged and remain unfulfilled by the hospital staff. We'll go to the next sentence. This sentence in blue represents 2 forms of violations. Autonomy is violated again as the patient's agency as an active participant with voice, lived experience, wisdom, and power, and social and clinical interactions, communication, counseling, and decision-making is undermined. We also see communication is violated as the patient does not feel heard, seen, listened to, believed in, and comforted. We also see the absence of trust, transparency, and truth in communication about the pain control. And here we see safety is violated again due to the inability of the hospital to again provide protection and support from this unintended experience and unwelcome harm. The hospital also failed to cultivate an experience of feeling love or loved with the D, being cared for, reassured, and comforted. Again, all words used by Black mothers and birthing people to define this domain. This third sentence in yellow. The hospital care reproduces racism, that is what we see here, based on differential access to and utilization of pain management options. Hospital administrators, clinicians, and staff may hold misconceptions that Black people don't feel pain or have a higher threshold of pain, creating barriers to optimal clinical recognition, responsiveness, and resolution. In yellow, empathy and and humanity are violated due to the absence of care with tenderness or tender love that Black communities so often don't experience within hospitals. Black mothers and birthing people explicitly define a violation of empathy and humanity as second-guessing patients' requests for an epidural, meaning a denial of patients' pain and patients' capacity or autonomy in determining what they need and when they need it. In the fourth sentence, which is green, we see a violation here. We see how Black mothers and birthing people utilize social networks and kinship. In this particular case, Black men as partners in the care, in the communication, the interaction, and the decision-making in order to experience and achieve and sustain safety, to activate their autonomy, and to advance systems accountability in recognizing and responding to their needs. So this is also an example where a Black mother and birthing person leverages patriarchy in the healthcare system because they are hoping that their husband will capture the attention and demand a response to them that they need to take care of their pain. And the last two, in orange, dignity and Blackness is violated as this Black mother was not afforded every option to manage her pain. And last, hospital care reproduced racism based on differential access, utilization of pain management options, and critical lapses around care. I won't do the third one, but I do want to, if I can hold 1 second. I do want to leave with the other practice or kind of process that we developed. We also developed the Virtual Quality Improvement Prioritization by Affected Communities, or the VQ-PAC protocol, which applies, again, a Black feminist ethnographic methodology to describe different forms of resistance and resilience that Black women community leaders adopt in order to mitigate obstetric racism while they're in the hospital setting. They're mitigating obstetric racism and the power inequities that emerge as they're supporting Black mothers and birthing people during hospital births. And our community leaders identified 74 and prioritized 44 potential social, cultural, novel QI topics and themes across the theorized domains of the scale. And this slide, again, is highlighting our community leaders across 15 organizations. And as you'll see to your left, the top two mitigating concerns, for them was for safety and accountability. What would it be like if there was a QI initiative that addressed shame, stigma, love, grace, and dignity, birthing while Black, or in the area of autonomy and kinship? What would it look like to have a Black birthing rights QI initiative in hospital settings? And I want to leave you with some things that you can consider doing as you think about your role as an OBGYN or in proximity to OBGYNs. Of course, what should be obvious is listening to Black women, Black mothers birthing from the Black paper, setting the standard for holistic care from the Black Mothers Matter Alliance, Black Mamas Matter Alliance. Number two, recognizing the historical experiences and expertise of Black women, mothers, birthing people, and families. Providing care through a reproductive justice lens, which I did not discuss specifically in this topic, but it's very important that as OBGYNs who really were the originators of reproductive dominance and injustice and inequity, we need to reconcile how our own origins and what we did. Next, disentangle care practices from the racist beliefs in modern medicine, nursing, social services, mental health, service provision, healthcare administration. Again, replacing white supremacy, white patriarchy with some of the theories that we've discussed here, learning how to activate the power and potential of patients with health literacy and autonomy, but also activating the power and potential and investing in paraprofessionals and other healthcare professionals beyond medicine and nursing, and recognizing that access does not lead to equal care. This is just a visual of what sacred birth is. We do believe obstetric racism is a threat to sacred birth, so our goal is to mitigate that. Again, think about how you can check your own assumptions and biases, embracing Black mothers and birthing people as assets and experts of their bodies and experiences, centering their voices and priorities in communication, counseling, care, and decision-making, collaborating truthfully, transparently, in a transformative way with doulas, midwives, other physicians, and loved ones in the birth work, reflecting again on some of the questions I provided you today and really coming from a place of empathy and humility, as well as curiosity, seeking ongoing learning and training, speaking responsibly and behaving respectfully, and also remembering that for Black mothers and birthing people, birth is not only a time for what we seem to be perpetuating, which is fear, death, discomfort, but also power, hope, pleasure, and sacred births are safe births, support autonomy and actualization, affirm, acknowledge, assess without re-traumatizing, focus on all the beautiful P's I said. It's physiological, it's positive, it's pleasurable, it's powerful. It needs to be participatory, not controlling, and express empathy. Please send me an email. I will share the slides with Nicole and the team. We're launching the Birthing Culture Rigor QI implementation science firm. Our convening is October the 6th. Email us on the slides for an invitation by sending us your name, title, role, organization, and email. We do have services and products that we'll be providing to clients. We are looking at funders, state perinatal quality collaboratives, health departments, hospitals. We definitely want people to come in dyads, meaning Black women-led community organizations, and fill in the blank. Please always bring your Black women-led community partners with us if you seek care, if you seek services and products with us. And thank you for your patience in me being not at my best, but thank you again for this opportunity. And I can be here, I am not in a rush, but I do thank you for all who stayed.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. For the sake of time, we'll just have a few questions, and I do just see one in the chat that has come up. And this is for LaSharon McDonald, who asked, can you explain what the issue was with the wife wanting to get her husband's attestation to help her advocate for herself?
So in that particular case, in many cases, what we are uplifting is that for Black mothers and birthing people who come into hospital births with, let's say, a Black man in the role of their partner, their brother, their uncle, their cousin, is that when Black mothers and birthing people aren't feeling safe, aren't feeling heard, seen, aren't feeling that the hospital staff and clinicians are responding to them, Black women are activating kinship as a way to leverage patriarchy, meaning they call on the Black man in the room because they see them as protective. They see them as people who can assure safety and accountability. And I have yet to see how kinship described in this manner is utilized to assure high quality, safe care. And so it sounds strange because it hasn't really been articulated in the literature. And because we have a kinship domain, we are recognizing how not only birth allows a reimagination of Black men as protectors and not as threats to society. We're seeing how the maternal grandmother, this transgenerational force of power where the grandmother sees their child, not the child that is about to be born, but their child experiencing harm and danger. We see how Black mothers and birthing people use sisterhood, whether it is a biological sister or sisterhood that is chosen. Kinship is really utilized by Black mothers and birthing people across all domains in order to mitigate harm. So in that example, the Black mother was screaming, trying to get the attention of her husband, thinking the husband would then get the attention of the staff to respond to her. And when that happens, we have seen, and there is data to show, that hospitals then involve what happens in society, right? Police get called, security is called, sometimes even psychiatry is called to evaluate the mental capacity of an angry Black mother or a non-compliant or disruptive Black mother. We also have just seen, and please forgive me for not remembering this lady's name, but just recently a Black mother's 2 of her children were taken from her through CPS. And I really invite you all to look at the work of Dr. Dorothy Roberts and Michelle Goodwin, like the way, I'm gonna speak for myself. I, as an OBGYN, have been trained to be an agent of the state. that enacts control over Black people's body by engaging social workers, CPS, psych, security, and police. So I am just very grateful for listening to Black mothers and birthing people who felt safe to share those stories, because these types of stories are not being sought out in traditional QI, which is why our current measures and methodologies are missing all the ways that harm or obstetric racism is being enacted upon our communities. That was a long answer, but I wanted to get out the fact that caring for our communities requires, QI, public health, implementation science to honor our kinship. We cannot continue to allow systems to disrupt, undermine, sever kinship. And until kinship becomes a valid measure, which it now is, then we, OBGYNs and leadership in hospitals and all of you all, we can hold hospitals accountable, because now we can say that disrupting kinship is a form of obstetric racism and have a valid tool to show, because it's a number. So now we can look at any phenomenon, right? We can look at the dual burden of obstetric racism and any quantifiable phenomenon in a hospital, in a city, in a county. Imagine looking at obstetric racism and state police shootings, obstetric racism and the disproportionate rates of CPS coming in, taking children out of homes. I mean, I'm just so excited, but it can be overwhelming. But this is what, I've been working towards, how do we really revolutionize care? And one way is the evaluation of care. And that is what I hope that you get from all this, is that I'm really trying to help in the redesign of care by focusing on the evaluation of care.
Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for your time, providing us with such powerful insight on the role of OBs and the role that they can take in advancing perinatal justice and accountability. For the sake of time, I would like to say, please reach out to Dr. Karen Scott directly. She has provided you with her information. Also, feel free to reach out to us here at Wayside Recovery Center as we continue to engage you all and bring you more content pertaining to maternal health. Again, Dr. Scott, thank you just for all your passion you bring to this topic and the great work that you are doing in your community, in the nation, just bringing this forward. So thank you all again for your time, for tuning in today. Thank you for our partners again. Thank you to DHS for funding this. And we hope that you all join us again as we bring more content pertaining to maternal infant health and the outcomes and reducing disparities. So thank you all. Have a great day and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you, Sir Representative Richardson, Nicole, Joe, everyone. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great day.
You too.